A single bulldozer's roar could drown out 100 wedding vows, but nobody expected it to happen, least of all Karen. It all started on a quiet spring morning in Willow Creek, a sleepy suburb where the most exciting event was usually the annual bake sale. I'd bought a 5-acre plot on the edge of town a year ago, a scrappy piece of land with wild grass and a crumbling barn, dreaming of turning it into a community garden. My name's Ethan Caldwell, a landscaper by trade, a guy who likes dirt under his nails and plans that take root slowly. The land was my sanctuary, a place to escape the HOA's iron grip on our neighborhood, with its endless rules about fence heights and mailbox colors. But Karen Mitchell, the HOA president, had other ideas. Karen was the kind of woman who'd smile while handing you a fine for leaving your trash can out past 8 a.m. blonde, impeccably dressed and armed with a clipboard. She ruled Willow Creek like a suburban dictator. She'd been eyeing my land since I bought it, calling it an eyesore at every HOA meeting. "Ethan, you can't just let it sit there," she'd say, her voice dripping with fake concern. "It lowers property values." I'd nod, promise to get to it, and go back to sketching my garden plans. But Karen didn't wait for permission. She never did. The trouble began when I got a call from my neighbor, Sam, a grizzled retiree who'd seen it all. "Ethan, you better get down to your lot," he said, his voice tight. "They're setting up some kind of fancy event. Tents, flowers, the works." I thought he was joking. My land was private property, untouched except for my occasional visits to clear brush. But when I drove over, my jaw hit the floor. My field was transformed into a wedding wonderland: white tents, fairy lights strung between poles, and a floral arch that screamed 6 figures. A string quartet was tuning up, and caterers were unloading trays of shrimp cocktail. At the center of it all was Karen, barking orders at a team of decorators like a general on a battlefield. I stormed over, my work boots sinking into the grass I'd planned to turn into raised garden beds. "Karen, what the hell is this?" I demanded, waving at the chaos. She turned, her smile as polished as her manicure. "Oh, Ethan, don't be dramatic. We're just borrowing your land for a little wedding. It's for my niece, Brittany. You weren't using it anyway." "Borrowing? This is my property," I shouted, loud enough to make a caterer drop a tray. "You didn't ask me." Karen's eyes narrowed, but her smile didn't budge. "The HOA voted to approve a temporary use permit. It's all perfectly legal. Besides, think of the exposure for Willow Creek. This wedding will be the talk of the town." She gestured to a photographer snapping shots of the setup. "You'll thank me later." I was livid. The HOA had no jurisdiction over my land. It was outside their precious gated community. But Karen had a knack for bending rules to suit her. I checked my phone, hoping to find some legal recourse, but all I had were missed calls from Sam and a text from my lawyer friend, Mia, saying she'd look into it. Meanwhile, guests were starting to arrive, dressed in suits and dresses that cost more than my truck. I felt like a trespasser on my own property. That's when I met Brittany, Karen's niece, a nervous young woman in a flowing white gown. She approached me, clutching her bouquet like a lifeline. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm so sorry," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder to make sure Karen wasn't listening. "Aunt Karen said you were okay with this." I didn't know she didn't ask. Her eyes were wide, genuine, and I felt a pang of sympathy. She was just a kid caught in her aunt's power trip. But sympathy didn't change the fact that my land was being hijacked. I spent the next hour arguing with Karen, who waved a stack of papers she claimed were permits, but looked suspiciously like HOA letterhead. She refused to budge, insisting the wedding would go on. "You can't stop progress, Ethan," she said, adjusting her pearl necklace. "This is for the community." The community, my foot. This was Karen flexing her control, turning my dream into her niece's Instagram backdrop. By noon, the situation was spiraling. The string quartet was playing Pachelbel's Canon, and a crowd of guests was sipping champagne under my oak trees. I called Mia again, who confirmed what I suspected. Karen's permits were bogus. The HOA had no legal right to use my land. "You can shut this down," Mia said. "Call the cops if you want." Or, she paused, a mischievous edge to her voice. "You could make a statement." That's when the idea hit me. I wasn't going to call the cops. That was too tame for Karen. I wanted her to feel the weight of her arrogance. I drove to my landscaping yard, where my crew was finishing up for the day. There, parked like a sleeping giant, Was my bulldozer a beast I used for clearing lots? I climbed into the cab, the engine rumbling to life, and my crew chief, Javier, raised an eyebrow. "Boss, you sure about this?" he asked. I grinned. Never been surer. As I drove the bulldozer back to my property, the ground shaking beneath me, I felt a mix of rage and exhilaration. This wasn't just about the wedding, it was about every time Karen had bullied someone in Willow Creek, every fine she'd slapped on a neighbor for a crooked mailbox or an unapproved flower bed. This was for Sam, who'd been fined for his unsightly vintage truck. For Mrs. Larson, who'd cried when Karen demanded she repaint her house. For every homeowner who'd felt her wrath. I pulled up to the edge of my lot, the bulldozer's engine drowning out the quartet. Guests turned, confused, as I revved the machine. Karen spotted me and marched over, her face a mask of fury. "Ethan, what are you doing? You're ruining everything," she shrieked, her clipboard shaking in her hand. "This is my land, Karen," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You had no right. Get everyone off, or I start moving dirt." She laughed, a sharp, condescending sound. "You wouldn't dare. You'll be sued into oblivion." But I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She'd underestimated me before, but this was different. I shifted the bulldozer into gear and rolled forward, just enough to make the ground tremble. The floral arch wobbled, and a few guests gasped, clutching their champagne flutes. Karen's composure cracked. "You're insane," she yelled, but I didn't stop. I aimed for the catering tent, where tables of untouched hors d'oeuvres sat like trophies of her excess. The tent collapsed in a cloud of dust, shrimp and caviar scattering across the grass. Guests screamed, scrambling out of the way. Brittany stood frozen, her dress splattered with dirt, her face a mix of shock and something else, relief. That's when the twist came. From the crowd emerged an older man, gray-haired and wiry, with a face like weathered leather. He introduced himself as Tom, Brittany's father and Karen's estranged brother. "Ethan, hold up," he called, waving his arms. I paused the bulldozer, curious. Tom wasn't on the guest list, though wasn't even supposed to be in town. "I heard about this circus from Brittany," he said, his voice gruff. "Karen's been pulling this crap for years. She bullied my daughter into this wedding, picked the groom, the venue, everything. Brittany didn't want any of it." I glanced at Brittany, who was nodding, tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted to make Aunt Karen happy," she whispered. "But this isn't my dream." The groom, a slick guy in a tux who'd been posing for photos, looked blindsided. The crowd murmured, sensing the drama unfolding. Tom turned to Karen, his voice low but lethal. "You've controlled this family long enough, Karen. You think you can steamroll every enemy daughter, this man's land, the whole damn town. Not today." He pulled out his phone, revealing texts from Brittany begging him to come, saying she felt trapped. The crowd's mood shifted. Whispers turned to glares aimed at Karen. I saw my chance. With Tom's revelation fueling me, I revved the bulldozer again. "Last chance, Karen," I said. She stood her ground, defiant, but the guests were already fleeing, their heels sinking into the dirt. I drove forward, leveling the dance floor she'd had installed without my consent. The wooden planks splintered under the bulldozer's weight, a satisfying crunch that echoed across the lot. The fairy lights fell in a tangled heap, and the floral arch toppled, petals scattering like confetti in a storm. Karen screamed, her voice raw with panic. "You're destroying my niece's future," she cried, but Brittany shook her head, stepping away from her aunt. "No, Aunt Karen. You're destroying it," she said, her voice trembling but firm. The groom, realizing he was part of a sham, threw up his hands and walked off, muttering about crazy families. As the bulldozer churned through the remnants of the wedding, I felt a strange calm. This wasn't just about my land, Anna Maria, it was about justice. Karen had built her empire on intimidation, but empires fall. The guests were gone, the caterers had packed up, and Karen stood alone in the wreckage, her clipboard useless, her dress streaked with dirt. But the story didn't end there. As the dust settled, I noticed a small wooden sign half buried in the chaos, hand-painted with the words, "Karen's perfect day ruined." It was Sam's doing, I later learned, a quiet jab from a man who'd had enough of her reign. I laughed, the sound carrying over the rumble of the bulldozer. Karen's face was a mask of defeat, but I wasn't done. The bulldozer's roar faded as I cut the engine, the silence almost deafening. Dust hung in the air like a fog, settling over the wreckage of Karen's grand vision. The once pristine wedding setup was now a battlefield of splintered wood, crushed flowers, and scattered champagne flutes. Karen stood frozen, her clipboard dangling uselessly at her side, her face a mix of disbelief and rage. Brittany, still in her dirt-streaked gown, clung to her father, Tom, who glared at his sister with a fire I hadn't seen in anyone before. The remaining guests had either fled or stood at a safe distance, whispering and snapping photos, no doubt already posting about the scandal on social media. I climbed down from the bulldozer, my boots crunching on the debris, and felt the weight of every eye on me. Karen's voice broke the silence, shrill and desperate. "You're a monster, Ethan Caldwell. You've ruined everything." She pointed a trembling finger at me, her pearl necklace glinting in the fading sunlight. "I'll sue you for every penny you have. You'll regret this." I crossed my arms, unfazed. "Sue me, Karen. But you'll need a better lawyer than the one who faked those permits." Her eyes widened, and I saw the realization hit her she'd been caught. Mia, my lawyer friend, had already sent me a text confirming the HOA's temporary use permit was nothing but a fabricated document, a power grab dressed up as bureaucracy. Karen's empire was crumbling, and she knew it. Tom stepped forward, his voice steady but laced with years of pent-up frustration. "This isn't just about Ethan's land, Karen. You've been bullying everyone for years, Brittany, this whole town. You think you're untouchable because you've got a title and a clipboard. But you're done." He turned to Brittany, softening. "Sweetheart, you don't have to do this. You don't have to marry that guy or live under her thumb." Brittany nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I didn't want this wedding," she said, loud enough for the lingering guests to hear. Aunt Karen planned every detailed address, the venue, even Derek. I just went along because I was scared to say no. The groom, Derek, who'd been hovering awkwardly near the ruined dance floor, threw up his hands and stormed off, muttering about dodging a bullet. The crowd gasped, and I caught a few sympathetic glances aimed at Brittany. Karen's perfect facade was unraveling, thread by thread. But then came another twist, one I hadn't seen coming. Sam, my grizzled neighbor, emerged from the crowd, holding a stack of papers of his own. He'd been quiet during the chaos, but now he had a glint in his eye that spelled trouble for Karen. "Ethan, folks," he called, raising the papers like a flag. I did some digging. Turns out, Karen's been skimming HOA funds for years, paying for her fancy car, her vacations, and, oh, this little wedding. He tossed the papers onto the ground, where they landed among the scattered petals. "Bank statements, receipts, all of it. I've got copies, and so does the sheriff." The crowd erupted in murmurs, and Karen's face went pale. "That's slander," she shrieked, but her voice lacked conviction. Sam smirked, unfazed. "Tell it to the authorities, Karen. They're on their way." Sure enough, I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. Her reign was over, exposed not just by my bulldozer, but by the quiet rebellion of a community she'd underestimated. I turned to Brittany, who looked like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "What do you want to do now?" I asked. She glanced at the wreckage, then at her father, and gave a small, determined smile. "I want to start over. Somewhere far from here. Maybe open a little bookstore, like I always dreamed." Tom put an arm around her, proud. "We'll make it happen, kid." As the sheriff's cars pulled up, Karen tried one last desperate move. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Ethan, please. I'll make this right. I'll pay for the damage, anything you want. Don't let them take me." Her voice was pleading, but I saw the calculation in her eyes. She was still trying to manipulate her way out. I pulled my arm free. "You made your choices, Karen. Now live with them." The deputies approached, and Karen's bravado collapsed. She sobbed as they read her rights, her perfect hair falling out of its bun, her dress streaked with dirt. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she was led to a patrol car, her clipboard left behind in the dust. Sam handed me a beer from his cooler, a rare grin on his face. "Hell of a day, Ethan," he said. I clinked my bottle against his. Hell of a day. But the aftermath wasn't as simple as I'd hoped. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications, texts, emails, even a few voicemails from neighbors I barely knew. Some called me a hero, others a lunatic. Social media was a firestorm, with hashtags like bulldozer justice and Karen gets karma trending locally. The photos of the wrecked wedding were everywhere, complete with that wooden sign Sam had planted. Karen's perfect day ruined. I couldn't help but laugh, but there was a bitter edge to it. I'd won, but at what cost? Mia met me at the lot later that day, surveying the damage. "You're lucky you didn't get arrested," she said, half joking. "But Karen's in deep. Embezzlement, fraud, trespassing, she's looking at real consequences." I nodded, but my eyes were on the land. The wedding was gone, but so was my clean slate. The ground was torn up, the grass I'd planned to nurture now a churned mess. My dream of a community garden felt further away than ever. Brittany stopped by, no longer in her wedding dress, but in jeans and a sweater, looking more like herself. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said. "Dad's helping me move to Portland. I just wanted to say thank you. You didn't just stand up to Aunt Karen, you gave me a way out." She handed me a small, handwritten note. "You reminded me to be brave." "Brittany." I tucked it into my pocket, a small spark of warmth in the chaos. Over the next few weeks, Willow Creek changed. The HOA board was dissolved, and Sam, of all people, stepped up to lead a new one, promising transparency and fairness. Neighbors started talking to each other again, not just about fines, but about real things: gardens, kids, dreams. My lot became a gathering place, not for weddings but for barbecues, where people brought seeds and shovels to help me start the garden I'd always wanted. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Karen's trial came and went, a quiet affair compared to the spectacle of the wedding. She was convicted of embezzlement and ordered to pay restitution, but the real punishment was her fall from grace. She moved away, her house sold to a young couple who painted it bright blue, just to spite her old rules. I heard she was living in a small apartment somewhere, her clipboard days behind her. Part of me felt a twinge of pity, but it was drowned out by the memory of her arrogance, her refusal to see anyone else's perspective. As I stood on my lot one evening, watching the first sprouts of my garden push through the soil, I thought about the cost of standing up. I'd lost a clean field, gained a reputation as the guy who bulldozed a wedding, and made an enemy or two. But I'd also gained something bigger: a community that fought back, a girl who found her courage, and a piece of land that was finally mine, in every sense. The wooden sign Sam had made was still there, propped against the old barn. I left it, a reminder that sometimes justice comes with a roar. What do you think? Was I right to take such drastic action, or did I go too far? Was Karen's downfall deserved, or was there another way to handle her overreach? Share your thoughts. I am curious to hear where you stand on this line between right and wrong.